Welcome back to the channel, guys. So, in today's geopolitical climate, there are so many existential threats to the United States of America. It's hard to keep track of who the big bad wolf really actually is out there, right? Is it Russia? Is it China? Is it the hot one of the last couple weeks? Iran. Ooh. Well, today we're gonna look at things objectively and just talk about realities, okay? Because all of those countries, all North Korea, right? They're really kind of just a look over here propaganda tool to keep you scared and afraid, so you're not paying attention to what the real threat to this country actually is. Now, I'm sure a lot of you probably already know what it's going to be, but that's because it objectively is the biggest threat to the American people and our country, okay? And that is going to be both the border and, by extension of that, the cartels, okay? The drug cartels. So, as an organization, the biggest threat to the United States of America. And I'm going to bring statistics, like I always do, and facts. This is my opinion. This is just the reality. When we compare these two foreign adversaries like China, Russia, Iran, when we actually look at the data, it gets a little silly to think about who the big bad guy actually is. Okay, so what we first need to do is let's talk about who our current government tells us, and this is a clip as of, I think, a day or two ago, who the biggest threat to the United States of America currently is. Let's take a watch.
Which foreign country do you consider to be our greatest adversary?
I think there's an obvious one in mind, which is Iran. Iran has American blood on their hands, okay? This attack on Israel, 200 ballistic missiles. What we need to do to ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power, that is one of my highest priorities.
So
there you go, guys. It's Iran, the biggest threat to the United States in 2024. A country with no nuclear capabilities that we know of, and definitely no intercontinental ballistic ability to deploy them and hit America, at the least, right? A country that could never reach America to attack American soil other through potential terrorist proxies. Very interesting that that country was chosen as the biggest threat to the United States of America. Wonder why? Well, it really does, history never repeats itself, but it sure does rhyme, and Iran sort of rhymes with Iraq. And this type of sort of pandering by the government towards Iraq really is similar to what we're doing in 2024 with Iran. Wonder why. It's very, very clear that the elite apparatus, military-industrial complex, wants conflict, direct conflict with Iran, and I think they're trying to figure out a way to do it. But no, Iran is the biggest existential threat to Israel, okay? Not the United States. They're not even in the top 10, okay? This is absolutely ridiculous. And by extension of that, we'll talk about some other ones, right? So the other one for the boomers, right? Ooh, scary. Soviet Russia, right? Guys, yeah, Russia, I mean, they're an adversary. They are not even in the top. I mean, who knows where the top they are. They're not a threat to the United States either. The only one that we could possibly say as the biggest threat to the United States, potentially as an adversary, would be China. But here's the thing. I mean, our economies are so intertwined, there's no realistic chance that we go to any direct conflict with China anyway, that it's sort of a moot point. So let's talk about realities. And that's what we're going to do in this video today. Okay, so we're going to jump into it. I'm going to talk about a bunch of different things that, are why this is such a huge threat to America. And the first one I'm going to start with, just so no one can argue, because you could try to argue with this if you want, but I'm going to bring the numbers, and particularly Americans killed by a foreign organization, okay? And that's why we're going to do that statistic first for all of you who want to say, the border's not a problem. Okay, we're going to dispel that right out the gate. Okay, so let's talk about the number of Americans killed by the Mexican drug cartels, and through that with fentanyl. Okay, so I'm sure you're well aware of the massive fentanyl crisis in the United States. If you don't know how that gets into this country, we're going to cover that in a second section here. But obviously, 99% of it comes into the country through the drug cartels, smuggle it in through our open border. Okay, so with that, I don't think we never talk about, no side, Republicans don't talk about this, Democrats don't talk about this, we don't talk about this, but if you guys don't know, let's take a look at the actual numbers of how many Americans are killed by fentanyl overdoses every year. All right, so check this out. Now, we have fentanyl, methamphetamines, coke, right? I'm just going to do fentanyl and cocaine. I'm actually going to leave meth out of it, even though a considerable amount of it does come through from the cartels. But just for argument's sake, okay, where the vast majority, if not all of the cocaine and fentanyl comes from, is through the southern border, right? So, and through the drug cartels. Now, if you look at this, 2023, 75,000 Americans killed by fentanyl overdoses, and extra 30,000 from cocaine. 2022, 76,000 Americans killed by fentanyl overdoses, with another 28,000 by cocaine. Okay, so what are we averaging? About 100,000 American citizens are killed vis-a-vis through the fentanyl trade through the Mexican drug cartels. Okay, so let's actually look at what those numbers really look like when we talk about what's the biggest threat to the American people. Okay, so we're going to do a little history, compare numbers to historical events. Okay, so the big one we got to look at, because again, as we're posturing to start another conflict in the Middle East, right, let's look at the way the first global war on terror started with 9/11. Okay, so 9/11, 2,977 Americans killed in a horrific terrorist attack. Okay, a day that'll go down in infamy, right? Basically 3,000 American lives lost. So when we compare that to the number of Americans killed by fentanyl and cocaine, because again, we said averaging about 100,000 a year. Wow. Well, if we look at that, how many more people were killed in 1 year, just 1 year, 2023, than were in 9/11? 33 times more people were killed by essentially the Mexican drug cartels in 2023 than were in all of 9/11. Okay, now remember, we started a 20-year war against two different countries over 3,000 Americans killed. And we've done what over just this year? 100,000 American deaths? Nothing. Crickets. Okay, now let's compare it to another biggest threat to America in the last 20 years, the entire global war on terror. All 20 years, because this is a better way to extrapolate some of that, some of those numbers, right? Entire global war on terror, 7,085 soldiers, civilians, contractors killed in the entire 20-year war on terror. Okay, biggest existential threat to America was Islamic terrorism, right? That's what they told you. Still is. Well, in just 1 year, okay, that is what? If we say just fentanyl, 75,000 deaths in the last year. Just fentanyl, that's what? 10 times the amount of Americans were killed by fentanyl overdoses just this year than in the entire 20-year global war on terror. But let's extrapolate that year for year. Let's do 20 years of potential fentanyl overdose deaths compared to the global war on terror 20 years. Okay, now we're looking at potential 2 million Americans killed in that 20-year time frame compared to 7,085 in that 20 years. That is a 286 times more Americans potentially killed in a 20-year period. Almost 300 times more Americans than were in the entire global war on terror. And what is being done about it from either political aisle? Nothing. Crickets. Okay, so might be asking, now we ask ourselves, well, what the hell is going on? Why is nothing being done? We definitely are going to get to that in the later part of the video. Now, again, we continued, and called Islamic terrorism the biggest threat to the United States existentially for the last 20 years over a total, if you put it together, 9/11 plus the global war on terror, 10,000 Americans killed. We've done literally nothing over 10 to 100x that. Okay, kind of crazy. Now, talk about how does it get here? Okay, so when we really look at this, we'll put up a map. Okay, obviously, it's 99% of it, 95% of it is made and synthesized in mainland China. Okay, it's then there's a little bit from India, but it's predominantly China. It is then mailed in both completed fentanyl in pills dosages, or the resources to make it predominantly to Mexico and to the Mexican drug cartels, who then smuggle it over the border into the United States to sell it to Americans. Okay, so we got to look at we got to look at the money involved too when we're talking numbers. Okay, to understand how big of a deal this actually is, right? So we can't obviously know empirically like how much fentanyl is actually entering the United States. Nobody's going to know that, and so it's an illicit drug trade. It's impossible to know. But what we can look at is in 2023, how much was confiscated, like by the DEA or whoever, the Border Patrol. We can look at the amount confiscated and sort of extrapolate some theories to how much potentially is actually coming into the country. Okay, so in 2023, 1.1 billion doses or pills of fentanyl was confiscated by authorities. Okay, 1.1 billion dosages were confiscated. Right, so let's just say, and we're going to be extremely generous here, that the DEA and authorities were able to confiscate 10% of all the fentanyl coming across the border. Again, that's probably like extremely, with a wide open border, right? Extremely generous. Okay, it's probably close to like 1%, 2%. We'll say 10%, okay, for argument's sake. Let's see, what does that mean? How much is actually coming in? Well, if, let's say, 10% is confiscated, that brings us to around 10, 11 billion pills or units probably are coming into the United States per year. All right. Now, from the Portland Law Enforcement Department on the average cost of one unit or one pill, one dose of fentanyl currently is it out anywhere from $5 to $10 a pill. Okay, we'll say $10 a pill just for math's sake, making it easier. All right, so if we have 10, let's say we'll go on the low side, 10 billion pills of fentanyl entering, or doses of fentanyl entering the country, at $10 a pop, okay, what do we got? $100 to $110 billion a year industry that is being funneled to the cartels, okay? That is a lot of money. That is a huge industry, okay? So that also was potentially why, because a lot of people make money off of this trade, not just the cartels, definitely people in America making money off this, were one of the problems of getting rid of it, okay? These cartels are highly incentivized to continue operating and doing so in what we're going to talk about, an extremely violent fashion, okay? Because it's a massive, and that's just fentanyl. We're not talking about cocaine, methamphetamine, all those, just fentanyl pills. So it starts to get insane when you start to think about that, right? Now, let's talk about the cartels themselves, okay? So as of 2024, this is, I'll put a map up, what cartels control what region of Mexico. And as you can see, unfortunately, or have influence in, maybe not completely control, right? It's almost the whole country, okay? Which is why, yes, it's a huge threat. It's not these little pockets of crime syndicates. It's basically the entire country that's either corrupted by, controlled, or in affiliate with the cartels. That's the reality of it. You have your two prominent cartels that run the fentanyl trade. And guys, all of this that I'm talking about, data comes literally from the DEA's website on the fentanyl trade. You can go to their website and look it up if you don't believe me, okay? You have your two prominent cartels that are bringing in all the fentanyl, and that's the Sinaloa cartel, obviously. Most of us have heard about that one. And the New Generation Jalisco, I guess, cartel. Those are the two that are bringing in all the fentanyl. And as you can see, the Sinaloa cartel owns almost the entire border between the United States all the way up until about Texas, okay? The problem with that is if you don't know anything about the Sinaloa cartel, how they operate, they basically operate through extreme violence, okay? Extortion, fear tactics, right? Cutting off people's heads, hanging people's bodies from power lines, killing people's family who don't do whatever they're supposed to do. Okay, and we'll get into that in the human trafficking section later. What you can basically think of them, and I like to really think of them as, because this is essentially what they are from an operating standpoint, is ISIS. Okay, ISIS operated in the exact same way through extreme violence and fear tactics. Okay, so my point with that is, we as a country, a government, a military, directed basically all of our attention, all of our funds, all of our military power, even in Afghanistan in 2018, 2019, to combating ISIS. Why? Because morally they were so abhorrent. Okay, the Sinaloa cartel is just as bad, and they are in our country and controlling the border, and they are the ones predominantly killing 100,000 Americans per year, and there is nothing being done by the United States to combat that. Okay, whereas ISIS, obviously, we gave every resource possible to combat that. Weird, right? You would think if we were doing this from a moral standpoint, that would be one of our top priorities. However, it's not a priority whatsoever. Okay. Now, move up. With that, and how this also extension works with the cartels and the border, and this is a big problem, is human trafficking. Okay, so a lot of the way this immigration works, okay, is not just your mom and pop, right, that decide they're going to walk across the border and find a new life, okay? They basically get trafficked here through the cartels, many of them, okay? And the way they do this is cartels bring you across the border, bring you into the country, and then you are required to pay back a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time back to the cartel for doing that. Now, if you, with the Sinaloa cartel, if you decide to not pay the Sinaloa cartel, then they will go home and go back to your hometown and murder your entire family. Okay, so essentially what these migrants become is slaves. They're slaves to paying off debts to the cartel. Okay, so that is a huge portion of this. So if you are someone who thinks the border's not a problem, you are supporting that type of human trafficking and slavery. It's not good. Not a good look, okay? None of us should be cheering that on, all right? Now, and it should be no surprise that the number one and number two highest human trafficking states in the entire country are, what do you think? The two biggest border states, California, Texas, okay? So that, you have not only the fentanyl, all the drug trade, hundreds of thousands of Americans being killed, you also have people who are being trafficked and basically turned into slaves in the United States of America. That's the reality of what's happening, okay? It is a problem. It is a threat, existentially, morally, okay? It should be. All of us should think that, but we don't. And in fact, aside from, people, when we talk about political parties, that's what we're going to get into next, we ask ourselves, why is nothing being done? And guys, this is not a brand new problem. Like, don't let the politicians fool you into thinking, okay, not that they've done a good job, okay, but that this problem started with Kamala Harris. That is total bullshit, okay? This problem, if you go back, this problem goes back past Reagan, right, probably to Nixon. We have been talking about the problem at the border for 40 and 50 years. Nothing has been done, okay, through Democrat presidents, through Republican presidents, through Democrat-controlled Congress, through Republican-controlled Congress. Nothing ever gets done. Okay, let's talk about why. And that's because both sides are highly incentivized to not fix the problem. All right, so 2024, let's take about the current response to how well we are doing at the border real quick, so we can get an idea of that, and then we'll talk about it, okay? Because it's important. All right, let's check this out.
There was an historic flood of undocumented immigrants coming across the border the first 3 years of your administration. Was it a mistake to loosen the immigration policies as much as you did?
It's a long-standing problem. And solutions are at hand. And from day one, literally, we have been offering solutions.
What I was asking was, Was it a mistake to kind of allow that flood to happen in the first place?
I think the policies that we have been proposing are about fixing a problem, not promoting a problem. Okay?
Okay, so yeah. Not sure how that's a response, but there you go. The border's awesome. But yeah, not a problem. Even though all the things I just told you about, we're doing a good job. Okay. Now, why do Democrats not want the problem fixed? Okay, the biggest one right now, and the reality of it is, brought in 10, 20 new migrants. Okay, they're predominantly being shipped to battleground and swing states. Okay, they've made it very clear that the entire intent by the Democrats is to nationalize all of these migrants. Okay, and if that happens, they're going to predominantly vote left. Okay, and that should pretty much swing every battleground state to the left. Probably never have a real American election. In reality, right? You have the elections, but the population will be so flip-flopped in these battleground states that no Republican will ever win again. Okay, highly advantageous politically if you could pull that off, right? Morally, not a great thing to do, in my opinion, but from a strategic standpoint, it does make sense. All right. Now, Republicans, do not let them fool you for a second that they want. Now, I'm talking about the elite establishment Republicans in Congress. They do not want this problem solved. The biggest part is economically and money. Okay, it's cheap labor. You got to think about all of these huge businesses, especially agriculture, okay, in the South, that are getting cheap migrant labor. All right, and it's labor that you could not pay your average American, especially Gen Z, to go out and do for the rate at which they're paying them. Okay, it's just not going to happen. So we're talking about billion-dollar industries that are highly incentivized by cheap migrant labor. Okay, so the right does not want this problem fixed either. So what I mean by this is there's a reason why there's hundreds of thousands of people ODing from fentanyl, right? Human trafficking at a massive rate, and neither side is doing anything or saying anything about it, right? Republicans will beat their chest in Congress. Well, we Kamala Harris the border, and then they don't do shit anyway once they have power. Okay, so do not get fooled by either side on this one, right? Neither side is the good guy when it comes to this crisis. Now, so let's talk about for last thing again, right? Because this video will probably get demonetized and probably just taken down, to be honest, because you're not supposed to be able to talk about this, right? This is that one no one's allowed to talk about. We'll see. But I'm going to say, what should we actually do about it? Okay, because it's one thing to bitch, whine, and complain, which both sides do, and then do nothing. It's another thing to offer solutions. All right. So for me, like if I'm in charge, okay, first thing I'm doing is basically ripping the entire military out of the Middle East, because in my opinion, it's not our problem. Okay, that's the reality of it. It wasn't our problem to begin with. We created the mess. And again, what are we doing there, right? Protecting Israel. Okay. And with that, use the military to defend the nation. That's the point of the military. National defense. Where's the biggest threat? Southern border. Deploy the military to the border. Okay? You want to stop migrant crossings? Deploy the military to the border. They'll stop. Okay? That's A. Okay? Next, you have to deal with the cartels. Okay? And so that obviously is basically dealing with an insurgency. Okay? But what are we really good at, especially Green Berets? Counterinsurgency, special operations. We've got 20 years experience of dealing with insurgencies. Okay? Deploy special operations to the southern border, begin counterinsurgency within southern border states. And also what has to happen, and you let Mexico know, because just so everybody knows, the cartels own the Mexican side of the border. Okay? You have to clear out, if you're America, white space through all those cartels in the northern side of the border. There's a reason why, if you guys didn't know this, there are massive inlaid IED encampments, defensive fighting positions all wading through the northern states in Mexico up to the border, because the cartel has prepared and is ready to deal with that conflict if it comes. Okay, they are ready for our counterinsurgency. Okay, so and will it ever happen? I don't know, but that has to happen if you want to stop all the fentanyl trade, the smuggling. you have to actually secure the border. And to do that, you need large-scale support to do it, right? So if we stop deploying hundreds of thousands of people to the Middle East and places like that, we'd probably have the ability to do it, okay? That's pretty much what I was going to say. And you basically treat it as a insurgency, both in the southern border states and the northern part of Mexico, right? Because that's really what the cartel is an insurgency. It's obviously a violent criminal organization, right? But you can look at it as terrorism too. It's the same lens, okay? So we are very, very good at that. We are better than anyone in the world at counterinsurgency. Maybe that we should actually protect our country, all right? Now, again, if you're somebody who thinks that the southern border is great and it should be open, cool. You support hundreds of thousands of young Americans being killed by fentanyl, and you support human trafficking and slavery. Okay, you do. So I would hope that when you reflect on this, you think, hey, maybe there is a better way to do this. We can do it humanely, because again, it's not very humane having the Sinaloa cartel control as much as they do in Mexico, violently murdering and killing Mexican people as well. Okay, so it would behoove us, both Americans and Mexico, to work together and actually maybe put an end to the biggest threat to the United States in 2024. All right, that's going to wrap this one up. I hope you guys found this one interesting, and I will catch you in the next one.